Week 11 in the NFL DFS coming up just around the corner, and it appears to be a week, at least to me, where there are some obvious ways to play things, whether that be a running back or with game stacks or anything else. I think that there are pretty clear paths we may want to use, and the question is, are those paths too obvious to the point where they become mega chalk, or should we just suck it up, use the chalk, and then deviate elsewhere? I think that's the key decision point for this week. We're going to break that down and let you know the favorite plays for us over on FanDuel for week number 11 right now. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com. Joined here, as always, by Brandon Gadula. He is the managing editor of numberFire.com. Brandon, week 11 coming up on the horizon. How are you doing today?
I'd say a little confused in the sense of whenever we first looked at this slate, and I don't know if sometimes, I don't know. I never know if you want me to just talk about something other than the slate and then we get into the slate, but
I don't care.
I just took it as like a slate question for today, but I was like, okay, cool. There are 5 games with good totals and the other games are bad. But the more you look at those top 5 games, you say one of them's good, and that's the Chiefs and Cowboys. And then I am just nitpicking every other game. And so I thought that this would be a pretty easy week because even with obvious games, I think a lot of people like good per dollar values based on optimizers. And we have a few of those guys who are outside of the top 5 games, but for us, that still means that we could, in theory, just play guys from those top 5 games, ignore the other games for the most part, and still find ways to be different. But I'm starting to talk myself out of some of those games, so that's why I think not talk myself out of to the point where I'm not gonna touch those games. But I just thought it was gonna be easier, so I feel a little bit silly now.
Well, I think that it's a question of, are the paths to failure enough to push you off completely, or do they just lower you on them relative to other games? That's a tough decision to make because we have to decide, what are the odds that this path to failure hits? What are the odds this path to failure hits? Stuff like that. And that's not an easy thing to know. You have to, decide. You have to figure out percentage, you have to figure out, comfort, you have to figure out what the field will do. Because I agree there are paths to failure for all those games. I still think that a lot of them are fine. They're imperfect, but they're fine. And honestly, there are paths to failure for Cowboys Chiefs. What if the Chiefs offense regresses to what it was the previous month? What if Dallas doesn't show up on the road playing outdoors? There are paths of failure there too. So the decision point is, how much do we care about those paths of failure? How likely are they to hit? Does it matter to us? And how do we handle that? We'll break all that down here in just a bit. But first, a quick reminder to make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed, wherever you get your podcast. We are, of course, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, you name it, you can find us there. Hit subscribe, and while you're there, leave us a rating and review as well. Also, a reminder, we have the Listener League back once again this week. FanDuel.com/league/Listener League for the FanDuel Podcast Network. It is a $5 entry with 3 entries max, and there is no rake. FanDuel.com/league/Listener League to get yourself entered for this week's Listener League. Again, $5 entry, 3 entries max, and no rake for that one. FanDuel and Simple Mobile have partnered to add an extra layer of excitement to one of the biggest free-to-play contests on the market. Introducing the FanDuel free-to-play Gridiron Pick'em contest presented by Simple Mobile, a completely free-to-play contest that gives you a chance to win big on Sundays. Here's how it works. Simply answer 10 Pick'em questions for the week's slate of NFL games and compete for a chance to win your share of $10,000 in cash prizes. If you're one of the highest scoring users on the day, you will be eligible to win some cold, hard cash. Kickoff will be here before you know it. So head to FanDuel.com/free/contest/Gridiron Pick'em. Again, there is a banner up in the lobby. Just go there, FanDuel.com/free/contest/Gridiron Pick'em, and make your picks today. And skip the contracts with high-speed data, talk, and text on a powerful nationwide network with Simple Mobile. For more details, visit FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel Fantasy app. Eligibility restrictions apply. Let's take a quick look at the slate overview for this week. And Brandon, to me, it comes down to 2 things. It comes down to, what do you do with the obvious undersized running backs? And do you just load up on KC Dallas or deviate there? Those are the 2 things stand out to me. AJ Dillon, I think David Montgomery's kind of in that range as well as being an undersalary back. If Alvin Kamara can't return, which seems like he probably will, Mark Ingram's in that belt. Dearness Johnson is high salaried now, but might still be a bit undersalaried. So to me, it starts with the running backs and then that KC Dallas game. Those are the key focal points for me. What about for you?
Yeah, I think those are really the big questions. Specifically, like KC Dallas, and then we extend that into how much better is that game than the other games in that top tier. And for me, I would actually put that game in its own tier and then every other game in the second tier. And I prefer the Raiders-Bengals game of the other games with high totals myself. But as far as the running backs go, I think that it's just the lone position for the most part. Well, with quarterback as well, just because popularity numbers are so dispersed. But I don't really care about chalkiness at running back unless that comes with my own concerns. Like, what are the concerns we would realistically have with AJ Dillon that his role evaporates? Like, there's nothing to point to that. Now, it could, because we don't know everything, but everything trends toward AJ Dillon playing the Aaron Jones role for the most part. The salary is too low, so it's hard to kind of talk yourself out of that. David Montgomery, we saw, hey, maybe they're gonna have Khalil Herbert be relevant.
He had his highest snap rate of the year in that game. It's wild.
And that was right, and it was pre-bye. So very clearly, everything points to the fact that he's going to be good to go. Now, that game has some concerns because there might be 30 total pass attempts there. But I don't have questions like that. I had questions with other value backs at times, but not those two specifically. And even though they're not in the low sixes or like upper fives, they're still value backs relative to their role.
And I think the good thing with them is that we don't really need to have a $5,000 back this week because we have, Tyreek Hill is amazing. He's $8,500. Devontae Adams, $84. You can get to that with mid-range backs. You can get to Travis Kelce at 8,300, Mark Andrews at 7,000, George Kittle, et cetera, et cetera. You can get to those guys. So I don't think we need like super, super safer values. I don't think we're going to get them, honestly. So like that, it's a moot point. Like, we might not get them. I think that we can just focus on those guys. And I agree with you. Like the checklist for me is, if I'm trying to decide if a back transitioning into a bigger role will be worth the chalk, is, do I know he'll be the guy? Will he get goal line work? Will he get passing game work? With AJ Dillon, he was getting 2 out of those 3 already. And the passing game work was kind of there too. Like, he's had 4 targets in multiple games. So to me, I feel like it's just kind of a no-brainer there. Montgomery's been getting most of those things. Not a lot of passing game work for him, but in part because they haven't thrown that much. And with Fields trending up, it's possible like maybe they do that more. But I think with the snap rate being what it is, it's fine. So I think that's the key decision point for me. I think if we're talking about like which of the focal points is more likely to bust, I think that KC Dallas is more likely to bust than the running backs, at least Dillon specifically. But I think that game is, like you said, in a tier of its own by a pretty wide margin. And I'm very okay loading up on that one for sure. We'll talk about that game in the bookmakers section. But let's start things off here with some injuries. Kyler Murray was able to get in a limited session on Wednesday. Not a guarantee yet that he plays this week because I do have a bye coming up. But I think with this being a divisional game, with the way things transpired last week, they need wins if they want that bye, which they should. DeAndre Hopkins missed practice once again with a hamstring injury. We'll talk about this game in the bookmakers section. Cam Newton is trending towards starting this week for the Panthers, according to head coach Matt Rule. It is a low total game, but to me at least, Cam is better than PJ Walker. So how does Cam likely starting impact your view of Christian McCaffrey in this game?
McCaffrey, I think, is the single player I'm having the hardest time with because we talked on Monday about the role being really good. If you watch that game, you saw that he had a lot of scoring chances despite the fact that Cam Newton is back as a goal line nuisance for Christian McCaffrey. But again, if the efficiency is better, you would think there are more red zone chances. More red zone chances, good for running backs, even if the percentage of chances they get goes down a bit. So I think McCaffrey's the hardest player to peg for this week because the salary's up. The game is awful. It's like legitimately terrible. We don't know exactly what, how involved Cam Newton will be at the goal line. Seems like pretty involved. And Christian McCaffrey, though, despite all that, he is the number 1 pick in fantasy football every year. He is worth like a 10,000 plus salary because he can get there without scoring. If he puts up a Christian McCaffrey game and scores once or twice, that's untouchable, even at the salary. So I'm having a really hard time with McCaffrey. I want to love him, and I'm probably going to try to get overweight on him in tournaments, but I don't know if he is a cash game like lock button, even with the value at running back, that we could pair him with Montgomery, Dillon, and McCaffrey as our 3 backs. So that's kind of where I am with McCaffrey. What about you?
Yeah, I think for cash games, it's okay to gloss over him because I can take salary savings and still get like a good roll from guys like Dalvin Cook. Jonathan Taylor, I don't want to use in cash because of the matchup, but like I can use Dalvin Cook in cash and feel pretty good about that. So to me, I think that for cash games, I'm okay not getting there. But for tournaments, I agree where I'd like to try to be overweight. Realistically, I'm not. I think it's the most likely scenario is that I will be overweight if the field winds up around 15%. So I'm probably going to be 20, 25, 30, somewhere in that range for McCaffrey. So, and like he could be around there, honestly, but it's just a question mark of I'm okay being in line with the field on guys like that because I know for a fact I'll be over on AJ Dillon. Like Dearness Johnson last week was on 44% of rosters, like basically doubled the field. Like even the chalkiest running backs don't get to 70, 80, 90, which is where Dillon will probably be for me. So I know that I'll be overweight elsewhere. I don't need to be overweight on everyone. So McCaffrey, I think I'll probably be somewhere in the 20 to 30 range. I'm okay with that. I'd like to get there. But just like if I'm going to use Mahomes, Tyreek, Devontae, guys like that, it makes it tougher to really get aggressive with a guy with a super high salary in a bad game. I want to get there, and I will get there, 20 to 30%, but I can't go too much harder than that there. Alvin Kamara returned to practice on Wednesday. Seems like he's trending toward returning this week. It's a great matchup with the Eagles because their defense struggles in a lot of areas. So will you use Kamara if he plays, or do the workload concerns we talked about with him earlier, with Mark Ingram being there, keep Kamara lower on the radar for you?
Yeah, he's pretty low for me. I don't envision a lot of scenarios where I would play Alvin Kamara because Mark Ingram proved, I mean, it was not the most flawless game, but he got there last week. They've been using him more and more. And we've been talking about Alvin Kamara's role trending down with Mark Ingram on the team before Kamara was hurt. So, you know, again, ask yourself, what are the odds that Kamara goes from like a 65, 70% workload in terms of snap rate pre-injury to like 90% now coming back from the injury? And it seems pretty low. And this game does not appeal to me much at all. The Eagles are really just turning to the run. That is, even if you're an efficient running team and if you're an efficient running team and you run at a high pace, you're still grinding clock because you're not really getting those incomplete passes. So I don't have a whole lot of appeal with this game overall. And I honestly probably won't have any Alvin Kamara in my player pool.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if I wind up with none because like he's by Dalv, whose role is better. His game is better. He's by Jonathan Taylor, whose game is better. And matchup is really tough, but like he's just playing out of his mind right now. I don't think Kamara is totally off the map because he in the 2 games with Ingram, he's at 27 adjusted opportunities per game, which is carries plus 2x targets. But I don't know, like there's not a lot of juice in that usage for him compared to other guys because the offense is so lackluster. Yeah. So I wouldn't be shocked if I wind up with none. It's not like a conscious thing where I'm like, no, I can't use him. It's more like realistically, if I'm keeping my player pool tight, I would not be shocked if he winds up not being involved with that. Clyde Edwards-Helaire returned to practice last week and has a chance to suit up this week. Not a lock based on what Andy Reid said. We'll talk about that game in the bookmaker section. Miles Sanders was designated to return for the Eagles. It means he can practice. Doesn't necessarily mean he will play. But let's talk about this backfield situation. Because if Sanders is out, we know to ignore them. We know that. Like, who cares? If he plays, though, any temptation for you on Miles Sanders or no?
No.
Okay. Eli Mitchell didn't practice Wednesday after having an operation done on his finger. I'll take that window. Sure.
Yeah.
Sounds like Mitchell will try to play through that injury this week. It's a great matchup with the Jaguars. So I have 2 questions for you. First, How would you handle Jeff Wilson at $5,000 if Mitchell were to sit? And second, would you use Mitchell if he were to play?
Well, I'll start with the easier one. With Mitchell, I would not play him. The salary is a bit high for me. We have AJ Dillon at the same salary, and if we're talking wide receivers here, I'd say I think it makes sense to pivot away from the guy with, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 times the draft percentage that the other player we have in question would carry. But running back is a volume based position. It's more predictable from that sense. You can't predict yards per carry, but you can to some degree predict workload. And that's why running back and draft percentage, like popularity numbers, don't bother me that much. So I don't think I could play Mitchell with the other two alternatives we have at the same salary or 200 below. As for Wilson, I could build a case, but it goes back to what does it get me? And the thing that it would get me this week is like Tyreek, Devontae, and a stud tight end. And I'm not quite certain that's a better trade-off than like Montgomery and maybe a more mid-level receiver with a George Kittle at tight end. So I don't know. I could see the case, but probably for me, I wouldn't get there in a lot of lineups.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit higher on him because we know that they're okay using him on the goal line. They've shown that in the past. Also, last year, he got a lot of work in the passing game. He had like 4 targets per game over their final 5 games. That was with Raheem Mostert being healthy. They still use Wilson quite a bit in the passing game. So talked about, checking boxes. Wilson would check the early down work box. He had 10 carries last week. He checked the likely passing game box. That would depend on Jermichael Hasty, I guess. Like if Hasty's out, I think that like Wilson's a pretty easy sell there. And then he checks the red zone box because they've shown that role in the past. And they had 4 snaps inside the 13-yard line last week. And Wilson did play one of those, whereas Mitchell played 2. So there's no Mitchell. I think that there are enough things going in Wilson's favor to use him. I don't think that's the most likely scenario. I think that he's probably going to play. But I'm hoping he does. So I don't have to think about this. But like, I would use Wilson if Mitchell didn't go.
Okay. It's fair to say, because I would use him too, but I think that maybe the real conversation is how does he compare to David Montgomery at 68, A.J. Dillon at 7,000, and then by just extension, of course, if you play those two, is it Wilson to get up to studs at receiver and tight end, or someone like a Dalvin Cook, Christian McCaffrey, whoever else?
I think he would grade out above Montgomery if Mitchell were to sit. I love Montgomery. I think he's a very good play this week. I think the offensive concerns are there. Matchup concerns are there. Passing game concerns are there. And if I can get, honestly, like Wilson would be kind of similar to Montgomery for $1,800 less in a better matchup on a better offense. So that's the reason I put him above Montgomery. And I like Montgomery a lot. That's not I don't like him. I'd put him below Dillon, though, despite the salary difference. I'd put him a good chunk below Dillon. I would say it's Dillon tier 1, Wilson, Montgomery in the tier 2 among the non-stud running backs.
Yeah. I think you sold me a bit.
Okay. It's still, I need to get a read thing. And that does depend on Hasty too. So a lot to change there. But like if it's no Hasty and no Mitchell.
Yes.
Yeah. I probably should have qualified with that. I would still use him if Hasty plays because I think he can get work in the passing game. I'd just be less enthusiastic about it.
Then Montgomery versus Wilson if we have Hasty.
If Hasty plays with no Mitchell, Wilson by a very, 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 very thin margin. I would.
That's originally how I took the question. So again, we're
fair enough. Yeah,
but something to monitor. Everything could change. We could get all 3 of them. We could get one of them. You never know.
Hasty did not practice Wednesday for what that's worth. So keep tabs on that one. It's an early game, which helps because it's 49ers usually aren't, but they're on the East Coast. That does help quite a bit. A lot of injuries for Browns versus Lions, a game I'm sure you care about deeply. Both Baker Mayfield and Jared Goff missed practice Wednesday. Jarvis Landry and Anthony Schwartz didn't practice. Donovan Peoples-Jones got hurt during practice with a groin injury. Nick Chubb is still on the COVID-19 list. So it's going great. I would bet that Jarv plays. I would bet that Chubb is activated. Sounds like both Goff and Mayfield will play, but pretty gross. What are you seeing here? Gonna keep it broad. What are you seeing?
I kind of want to like Nick Chubb and DeAndre Swift, but I don't think I'm going to get there because this game could just be abysmal. It feels like we're potentially just feeling the Lions embrace the tank entirely. So we could get Tim Boyle starting a quarterback. We could get, I'm just looking ahead because it's Thanksgiving slate next week.
Oh, no.
We could get Tim Boyle on the Thanksgiving slate, but I know we're focused on this week. So I really do want to like Swift and Chubb, but again, we don't know if Chubb's going to play, and even if he doesn't, I think Dearness is too high salaried at 8,000.
Really?
Compared to other backs, yeah.
I mean,
within this game,
so like
this game's going to be terrible though.
He's at 31.5 adjusted opportunities per game in his games with no Chubb.
This game's going to be terrible.
I don't care. Like, that's absurd.
Okay, so Johnson with no Chubb at 8,000 or Montgomery at 68.
Johnson, if there's no Chubb.
I would go Montgomery.
Okay. I think the more interesting discussion would be Johnson versus Dalvin, and I think that he's like in that tier. Because Johnson's 8,000, Cook is 84.
You're that high on this game?
No, I'm that high on his role if there's no Nick Chubb.
I don't know.
31.5
it feels like
per game, 162 yards per game, 37% red zone share, which is just fine. But like, that's stupid against the freaking Lions.
This is like whenever you liked Damian Harris a few weeks ago, where it didn't feel like it fit your process. We got the Browns.
He's at 5.5 targets per game in that span. He's not Damian Harris. How dare you insult Dearness Johnson and call him Damian Harris? What is this?
I mean, if you let me even start my sentence, you would have understood where I was going. Damian Harris did not fit your process to me. Dearness Johnson is an 11.5 point favorite, which you don't like huge running back favorites. The total is 43.5. You don't usually like games that are this low total, especially with other games. I'm surprised you like Johnson. That's all I'm trying to point out. I don't care if you play him or not. I don't care. I'm not saying he's Damian Harris. Very different roles. I get that, but this does not seem to fit your process, and I wanted to point that out to you.
I care less about script when they're under salaried, which he would be at 8,000.
All right.
And like, I don't care about total as much for running backs. That point is actually true. I don't care much about total for running backs. It matters, but it matters less. So that part, like McCaffrey, I wouldn't consider if you were a receiver.
Okay. I just wanted some clarity. I wasn't trying to
hopefully Nick Chubb plays and I can just ignore this. Like, that would be great. So rest up, Nick. Get better. He's 9,000. I think even if Chubb goes, we're not there at 9,000, correct?
I liked the idea of Nick Chubb, but I said I don't like this game enough.
But like, Dearness with no Chubb is a better role than Chubb with Dearness.
Yeah, but that's not the question. It's Dearness versus other backs in much more promising games.
Anyway, any other Browns you like here or no?
No, I don't like anyone in this game.
That's okay, good. I'm going to skip this game then. Jeremy McNichols missed practice Wednesday due to a concussion. I don't like this backfield. I hate it. But if McNichols misses time, there we go. That'd trim it to a 2-man rotation instead of a 3-man rotation facing a really bad Houston defense. The problem is that like Deontay Foreman is $6,200, which is like outrageously high for some reason. Is that high enough, Brandon, where you would ignore him even if McNichols can't go?
Well, they are favored by 10. The total is 44.5. So that is basically the same as what we get with Dearness. So I'm assuming you would pay 10,000 for Deontay Foreman here.
No, because there's no Adrian Peterson in Cleveland.
Man. No, I don't really. So I picked up Foreman in season long, which I don't bring up to talk about my season long team, but I kind of did it begrudgingly, and I put in a very like lukewarm offer in my leagues, and I got him in a few spots. So I thought he would be more popular as a waiver wire ad, but
Yeah.
I didn't really like the role. I think we recapped this briefly Monday, or I remember looking into it, and it's like the snap rate is probably not going to be high enough. He's going to have some concerns. I know he kind of will probably carry some popularity, but I don't think there's enough to make him like a core play at 62.
Adrian Peterson ran more routes than Deontay Foreman last week. He ran 6 to Foreman's 5. I know it's not a huge split, but like that's really gross. Yeah, I think with two guys splitting early down work, because like Peterson still got work in that game, and if there are no McNichols, like I don't know what the passing game situation would look like. So
will they have to pass it at all? Like that's another thing.
That's true. They might not have to. So would they split 20 carries? That's 20 adjusted opportunities. Like,
split like you're saying 10 carries each?
No, like 20 each. Okay. They run 56 plays. They run the ball 40 times. Yeah. They throw 16.
I mean, that honestly wouldn't surprise anyone, or should.
Mike Vrabel is like aroused hearing that as being like in the range of outcomes. So I don't know. I'd have a tough time getting to him. So
this is a good example though too of like we don't know what Deontay Foreman's role would be.
Correct.
With no McNichols. Like we can project it, but we don't know.
Correct.
We should know what AJ Dillon's dealing with.
We should know David Montgomery's role.
Well, yeah. Now Dearness without Chubb, we know what that role is. Like I'm not like I was kind of teasing Jim a bit. I think the salary's like a bit high for me, but like we don't know here, right. And like that's a big red flag. That it's kind of a trap level. Of course, we at least know enough to know that like Adrian Peterson's not going to play 90% of the snaps. Like it's not like we have no idea, but it could be a 50-50 split. But Foreman could also play 70%. We don't know. And I don't really know if the risk is worth it.
I think that's where I'm at as well. The Jets are going to start Joe Flacco over Mike White this week. Wacko for Flacco is back. Zach Wilson not ready to return yet. And I think this is a lateral move. Personally, people seem to like Mike White. I don't quite get it personally, but hey, I think it's a pretty lateral move. So it doesn't really impact anything for me in terms of viewing the Jets skill guys and the Dolphins. What about for you?
I mean, really the only player I'd be interested in is Michael Carter, 66. I don't think there's enough there.
I looked briefly at Corey Davis. I couldn't quite talk myself into it because he's $6,400, which is pretty high, but like I looked at it, stared at it for a hot second at least.
I mean, I think the key change that we could assume is that there should be more downfield passing.
Right, which negatively impacts Carter because that's the only reason he was like hyper viable was because he's getting these dump offs.
Yeah. Now I know you're talking about the Dolphins, right? In a trend. Yeah. So I mean, we could talk about this game a little bit more in detail, but sure. The sheer fact that Flacco's starting, I don't think we can consider very actionable unless we are looking only at downfield passing work and probably downgrading Carter as a result, unless you think Joe Flacco is substantially more efficient than Mike White was. And so then they're in scoring position more, which I personally am not going to project.
I think they're the same person. Like one just throws deeper. They're the same. It's a lateral move. Mike White's fine. Joe Flacco's fine. Like, just who cares? We'll talk about the Dolphins later on, though. So let's talk about some bookmaker info for this week and start things off with that marquee game between the Cowboys and the Chiefs. Total is 56 right now. Chiefs 2.5-point favorites. We know that we want to stack this game, but all games have paths to failure. That could happen. So how aggressive will you be in loading up on this game? And I think one way you'd phrase this is, in what percentage of your lineups will you have a non-Dak or non-Mahomes quarterback there?
Well, possibly 0.
Yeah, I think that's on the table.
I'm having a hard time at quarterback. I'm nitpicking everyone, and I'm not nitpicking these two. No. Everyone else is kind of off, like, I don't want to say off the radar, but like outside my realm of like comfort. And I'm going to mention a name here, and I know Jim's going to make a face.
Oh no.
but I'm looking at like I've exhausted my options. Like Carson Wentz at 6,900 within a game that could have a lot of points, tough defense. Like he's been really bad against tough defenses. So I can't even try to think outside the box and feel like, hey, this gets me access to whatever because I don't need value at quarterback. So I think that bringing like the whole quarterback slate into the conversation, these two guys are so much above everyone else that I don't really anticipate much. I don't even know who my third quarterback would be this week. What about you?
I tried to rep someone else and I couldn't. So I'm in the same boat. Like I couldn't find anyone. Like the only guys I like considered for half a second were Josh Allen, Russell Wilson, and Kyler Murray. Those were the three. And like you could say absolutely no to Russ, and I wouldn't push back. Like that's a fine take. Totally fine. It's just like Lamar, weird game. You know, he's had some bumps, I would say, as a passer too. Tannehill, he's been not great without Derrick Henry. He's also in a not great game script.
Big
Actually,
favorite.
Eric is like somewhat considerable. Kirk Cousins, somewhat considerable. Joe Burrow, somewhat considerable. So I feel like to me, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say my floor ceiling ratings have Allen number one as usual, which isn't surprising. Dak's actually like 10th for some reason. I need to make some changes there. I know. But it's just really flat and nobody seems to have a bunch of upside.
Yeah.
Like, and that's crazy because we have multiple games with like heavy totals, but I'll talk about some splits in just a second that are worrisome about like the Russ Kyler matchup.
Yeah.
Like I could see maybe you say, hey, like Tua's there, but when I think of Tua, I do not think of like upside quarterback.
No, it wasn't the perfect once, but like, you know, it was a pretty low scoring week, which it could be again, but I don't want to factor that in. Maybe I should be higher on Burrow, I guess.
I think Burrow's the guy for me that I would save salary with if I need to.
So I said Russ and Kyler. I should probably say Allen and Burrow are like the next two I'd consider. I think that should be where I'm at. Okay, so we're really high in this game. Love the two quarterbacks. Could see ourselves whittling it down to just those two guys. What is your preferred way to stack this game?
It's going to be. This might be a game where I go like multiple pass catchers with my quarterback, or like Dak plus Zeke plus Gallup or something like that. To pick only one is really tough. I would probably lean. I'd probably lean Mahomes, Kelsey, because I think that tight end is a very specific type of position this week with some studs on the docket. So I'm going to say Mahomes, Kelsey, Zeke, and Gallup maybe.
Okay, that's fair.
Like a pretty heavy stack.
I think that the Zeke with Dak pairing is pretty fun again. I think that, like, to me, like I've got one in front of me right now, and it's Mahomes, Tyreek, Gallup, and I think like I prefer to get that. Yeah, I prefer to get to Lamb because he's working from the slot again with Gallup being back, and that's kind of how you can shred this Kansas City defense. He's the guy who like I felt the most steady with most of this year. I will say that because Lamb blew up last week and because Gallup's so low salaried, for a single entry tournament, Amari Cooper is really, really intriguing at $7,300. He still has bonkers upside. He can still go nuts and burn you for not using him. So like maybe if I'm talking single entry tournament here, I've got only one way to stack this game up. Maybe I should go Amari. But like if I'm trying to get to Dalv, trying to get to AJ Dillon, guys like that, realistically, Gallup is going to be grading out pretty well. The one concern that I have here with, you know, being all in on the Dallas passing game is that you can beat this Chiefs defense in the ground. We've seen Dallas fully be aware of when they can beat a team on the ground and just pummel them to death. So like, I think that lends itself well to a Mahomes, Tyreek, Zeke stack as well. So although I think Zeke is objectively oversalaried compared to guys like Dalvin, compared to, I mean, his role is pretty similar to Joe Mixon's, and Mixon is almost $1,000 lower. I think Zeke is oversalaried and therefore will not be a fixture for me in non-game stacks. I do want to make him a decently large focal point within those game stacks because of the way they could play this thing.
So you think Zeke at 85 in the game of the week is oversalaried, but Dearness Johnson at 8,000 in a horrible game would be undersalaried?
Correct.
Okay. That's just wild. I mean, like I
mean,
can
their
see
workloads are very different, and that's why. Like 22.9 adjusted opportunities.
If you're building a cash game lineup and you have 85, you would go
Dalvin.
Johnson over. No, you already have.
If I had a cash game lineup and there's no Chubb, I would go Johnson in a heartbeat. Yes, over Zeke.
Okay.
And like I might not spend the 500.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna go back to the Amari Cooper thing because last week Dallas pulled their starters. It was a route, but he ran 89% of the routes. By contrast, CeeDee Lamb was at 60%. He came out early with an arm injury. Pretty sure it was an arm injury. So he might not be 100%. And that again leads me like Cooper had overachieved in the 2 games out of the bye. Then I said like, I don't mean to make it sound like that, but I liked Lamb a lot last week because he was underperforming and Cooper overperformed. We saw Lamb overperform last week, and now I think that it would make a lot of sense if it's Cooper's turn to get to go over expectation, especially if he's the healthier of the two.
Well, they're all healthy. Everyone was full in practice except Tyron Smith. He was limited, and he didn't play the past couple weeks. So like, they're healthy. That's pretty scary. They're number 1 on my power rankings for betting, and like I kind of like double taked at that, but then I was like, yeah, that sounds right, and I was good with it. We had Nate Tice on our betting podcast yesterday, and I like brought up to him like, hey, Cowboys are 10-1. He's like, I already bet that yesterday at plus 850. So like, Cowboys are good. So maybe I should go Dak over Mahomes, honestly. But I think because I could see them being a bit more ground heavy to exploit the Chiefs' weaknesses, that's pushed me towards Mahomes. But I think that they're like not even a 1A, 1B. They're 1 and 1. Like I don't have a preference.
I think if I flip the coin and then you do the thing where you flip a coin and then like which one you actually wanted, I think I'd probably lean toward Dak.
Okay, that's fair. But I can't push back on
if I don't have an extra 100, I'm gonna like whatever.
Where are you at with the non-elite guys here? So Darrell Williams, if there's no CEH, if there is CEH, and I guess Byron Pringle. I don't know. Like,
yeah, I'm not chasing. Guys? I'm not chasing what would be tertiary role for the Chiefs as far as pass catchers go because Mecole Hardman really would have had to have like done something to be completely irrelevant. He got pretty dusty last week, but that goes against everything we've seen through week 10 or through week.
I think that they just benched him.
Yes. Is that enough to believe in Byron Pringle being
I don't think
in that role?
I don't Checklist is 85 yards or 2 touchdowns, and I'm not sure he can get either.
So I'm not going to touch any of the, again, tertiary pass catchers. So it's just Tyreek and Kelsey, and I like Kelsey a lot this week, which is not like I talked him up like every week last year. Yeah. I don't know if I probably had him as a love like early on in the season, but not for a while. I've changed my tune on Kelsey. I would say Darrell Williams if no CEH. If CEH plays, I'm not going to play CEH because we've seen just nothing from him. So I'd go Darrell without CEH. And then for Dallas, I think it's the top 5. Dalton Schultz is kind of interesting just because the Chiefs are the worst adjusted pass defense against tight ends, but I don't know if I'm quite going to get there myself.
Yeah, I think you get squeezed with no Gallup, so I'm probably not going to get there either. With Darrell, though, he's $6,300. That passing game role last week was sick. Passing game production was sick. Like, looked great. So $6,300, I'd put him above Montgomery if there's no CEH. Maybe I'm just lower on David Montgomery than I think I am.
No CEH, Darrell Williams. No CEH, no Nick Chubb. Darrell Williams or Dearness Johnson. I think
close.
you'd be a little bit. I think you'd be a little bit like egregious to say it's Dearness, like with no hesitation there.
I don't think so. I think it's close though. I think Darrell will be a pretty good option just because like the passing game volume has been so steady for him. And I think with the way he played, I don't think that's going to go away. So I'd feel good about Darrell if there were no CEH. Any final thoughts for you on this game?
This is the game, the only game that I can't really nitpick much at all.
I agree. So let's move now to games we can nitpick. The total for Packers versus Vikings is 49.5. Packers favored here by 2.5. Not the fastest game by any means, but it is indoors. We know where the ball is going. Where does this one rank for you in terms of game stacks for this week?
I think it's going to be third for me. Obviously, Chiefs Cowboys is number one. For me, the second game is going to be Cincinnati and Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think this game is number three just because of the concentrated usage. And we love both starting running backs in this game from a fantasy standpoint, but I think it's sorry, our note sheet says Packers versus Cowboys, and I was like, am I on the wrong week here? What am I doing? Because I was going to mention how it's
game too, though.
I was going to mention how it's a divisional game. And because we have two divisional games within the top five, like these standout games, I wanted to go back and just kind of look at what has happened in divisional games, because we generally like know to avoid the divisional games to some degree, or like downgrade them, I should probably say, rather than avoid. But I wanted to see if that was true. And both sides are top five in adjusted pass defense according to numberFire. And overall, since 2012, from 2012 to 2020, so not including this season, if you look at just QB1s projected for the most fantasy points on their team, about 26% of the time, those quarterbacks go over 300 yards. If you look at divisional matchups where the opponent was a top 6 defense entering that week, that number drops to 18%. So, like, I could possibly talk myself into Aaron Rodgers as like the QB3, but historically, it's just not the right sort of situation. And all that being said, Devontae Adams is kind of due for touchdown regression, which it depends on how much of a long-term view you take, because he's overperformed there like insanely. But if you look just within the season, he should actually have some better touchdown luck coming, like moving forward. So I like Devontae. I don't think it's enough for me to get to Rodgers. And of course, I'm going to play AJ Dillon from the Packers side. But what are you seeing here for the Vikings?
I think the easy way is just to stack the running backs. And like, I know people may have concerns about that because like we think of like, hey, correlated pieces, one running game with the opposing passing game for script. That doesn't matter too much to me because like we see running backs stacked in the same games pretty often. Last year it happened twice in perfect lineups. This year it's happened twice within the past couple weeks. It was week 8, Michael Carter, Joe Mixon. Week 9, Nick Chubb, Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon's been in a lot of perfect lineups this year, weirdly. So like game stacking running backs is fine. If the role is good, if the game is close, this game is both. So I think that's the easy way to go, is just stack the running backs.
So is this going to be Dearness, DeAndre Swift week? Is that what you're telling me?
No.
Well, if Dearness is a lock for the perfect lineup, I mean, you can at least make a case for DeAndre
I'm
Swift.
thinking Chubb's going to play, so I'm not really thinking too much about it. But like,
but after all this, you think Nick Chubb's going to play?
Probably. I think he'll probably get cleared by then. Because he tested positive like last Monday or Tuesday, so he should probably be back by then. With Dalvin and Dillon, though, I think that like we were talking before about like I've got one lineup. Maybe I want to get to Amari. I definitely want Dalvin and Dillon in that lineup. I think that they, to me, are like the coriest of core plays. Dillon above Cook, obviously, but like among the studs, I think Dalvin's probably my preference relative to salary. Like compared to Zeke, Kamara, Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, I think I've got Dalvin 1 from that group. Do you as well or no?
I think I do, yeah. Okay. With like, it's not really fair even to compare him to McCaffrey just because the salaries are so different. But
yeah,
you know, so we're gonna have our snake draft tomorrow on Friday with JJ Zacharyson. I think Christian McCaffrey at this point is just the no-brainer 101. Just take him and move on. Yeah. But when we factor in the salary cap, situation, even though, because like I don't like that game a lot. I still think he's the best raw play.
I agree.
But at that salary, I think it's enough where you have to kind of step back. Taylor is a big underdog, and Buffalo's just been a really good defense against not great opponents, but
I'll talk about that later too.
Yeah, a little bit of a teaser there.
Uh-huh.
So I think you're right where Cook is just the number one play.
I think I agree with you on Devontae. The problem is realistically, I'm just going to have Tyreek Hill more. But like you do range of outcome stuff. It is so within the range of outcomes for Devontae to outscore Tyreek Hill. So like I want to actively make sure I get in Dalvin, Devontae game stacks as well with Dylan in there. I don't mind Devontae and Dylan. That's fine. Who cares? But I want to actively make sure I get those because although I feel better about Hill, I know from a probability perspective, the odds that Devontae outscores him are decently high. So I do want to get him in there. What about the lower salary pieces here? I mean, I guess we should probably talk about Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. Where are you at on them?
Sorry, I was checking out my Sims, and naturally I have Tyreek a bit more likely to get to 25 and 20, but it's about the same to get to 15 FanDuel points as compared to Devontae. But seems like popularity projections might be fairly high on Devontae over Tyreek, which I don't quite get.
Why?
Why don't I get?
No, why would that be the case?
Okay, so I'm seeing some conflicting stuff, but
okay,
it seems pretty tight. And if it's pretty tight, I would go Tyreek. I would be more inclined to go to Devontae in like a single entry if the popularity projections were massively different. So, I mean, I still like Devontae plenty, again, with the touchdown regression expected, but yeah, Tyreek for me in a vacuum for sure. And you asked me about the Vikings. Is that what you?
Thielen and Jefferson, catchers? Yeah. Well,
Jefferson.
Yeah. Not versus each other, but how do you view them relative to the slate?
So Thielen's just a no for me. He's flashed a little bit more yardage upside than we've seen from him historically. I don't actually know if that's like literally true, but it feels a little bit more true. He needs 2 touchdowns to be relevant, and that's not something that I could ever really bank on. Jefferson, great game last week, so that could get a little bit more popularity onto him at 79. I don't think that there's enough in this game. Like this game with the passing numbers I talked about, like against tough defenses, like division opponents, these teams play each other a lot. Like I don't think there's enough to make him a core play, and I don't like this game enough to stack it. Outside of the running back, so I'm probably going to be absent on Jefferson in my player pool.
I mean, like realistically, like he's by CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase. I think I prefer both. Is that crazy?
No, why would that be crazy?
I don't know. I love Justin Jefferson, that's why. But like those guys are stupid. So I think I go there.
So I would say Lamb has a better chance to get to 2 touchdowns, which I know he just got last week, so I probably shouldn't say that because that's just not how touchdowns get scored. But and then Jamar Chase has, of the 3, like the ability to go for 180 yards. So I think Jefferson is third out of that tier as well.
And that's not a shot at Jefferson. It's just because we like those guys a lot. So let's move now to the Seattle game as they're facing the Cardinals. Total is at 48 with the Cardinals favored by 1.5. The Seahawks sound like they might be on the verge of trying to establish it again. And Kyler is banged up. This game is still tempting because it's a high total. It's a tight spread. We have good pieces, good quarterbacks on both sides. Do the red flags for you outweigh the possible positives of this game?
Yeah, this game I'm lower on than the Packers and Vikings game. I have a lot of concerns about this one. I would not be surprised. And look, I liked that Packers Seahawks game last week. I thought the over was in play, but did not happen. That's not to say that I'm like out on Seattle entirely, because that's a little bit egregious to go like, hey, Russ is talking about letting Russ cook. He's the one who's cooked. Like I'm not, there, but like there are enough concerns. It's the same thing applies for the Seattle offense, at least, where Arizona is a top 6 adjusted pass defense, according to numberFire. Again, that's just not good for passing production overall. So I'm probably not going to play any Seahawks. I'd be more inclined to play some Cardinals, specifically Zach Ertz, just because the salary is really low. So if I'm not playing like a stud tight end, I would at least consider someone like Ertz down at 5,000.
I think if I'm multi-entering, I want to make sure I have exposure to DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett because this game is a path to blowing up. It's a first-time divisional matchup, I believe. That helps.
Yeah, I
That
didn't
helps.
look at that. I'm just saying divisional
Yeah.
matchups overall.
But that does help. And like we know that Lockett and Metcalf, when Russ is Russ, can obliterate a slate. So I'd like some exposure to them because I think they will get glossed over. But like from a core play perspective, I cannot prioritize them over Chase, over Lamb, over Cooper, over if we're talking Lockett, actually you probably could prioritize him over like Michael Pittman and Jalen Waddle. I think I could go with Lockett. Maybe I'll wind up being pretty high on Lockett. I think I had 40% last week, which didn't go great. But I think I could probably get there with Lockett. So maybe I'm actually higher on him than I thought I was. But I think the other guy worth talking about here is James Conner. Salary is 72. I'm guessing people will be bored with him after last week where they felt like they got by on a touchdown, which they did. Objectively true. But if Kyler is back and you give me James Conner with Kyler at 72, that's a pretty good tournament pivot. I think I'd use him with AJ Dillon. So it's not like a pivot, but like I would bet that he gets ignored. And I think that's kind of interesting. So that's kind of the one guy to highlight here is James Conner as being someone I want to be in on at least a bit if Kyler can't go.
Conner with Kyler versus Montgomery.
Well, with Kyler, I'd go Conner.
So it sounds like we are lower on Montgomery than we thought.
No, I like him. It's just like there are some things that need to break a certain way for him to be above these guys. I like him.
I have Conner fourth in my floor ceiling ratios here.
Yeah. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And I can't push back on it. I think it's like I'm assuming Nick Chubb is going to play, which knocks out Dearness, who we talked about relative to Montgomery. I'm assuming that CEH is probably going to play, which lowers the appeal in Darrell. We talked about him relative to Montgomery. So I think like Montgomery is still going to be a pretty prime focus for me. It's just like realistically, like there are paths to his grading out worse. It's kind of actually like James Conner last week. We were like, oh, we like Conner because there weren't a ton of options, but then Kamara opened up, Dearness Johnson opened up, and it wound up being where Conner was still like someone I used, but like I was not as high on him as I thought I'd be. Montgomery might wind up being that, depending on how things break this week. But I do think that Conner, if Kyler plays, is a pretty good play at 72.
Yeah, I'm with you. What are your thoughts on the Cardinals pass catchers if Murray goes?
I don't know, man. I'm
because like it sounds like I'm lower on this game than you are. You have like fear of missing out on Lockett and Metcalf. My fear of missing out is not great enough to want to like burn lineups on the chance that Russ is like not really back. It's a tough matchup. Again, like I wouldn't be surprised, of course, if this game scores 60 total points, but I think the odds of that it sounds like lower than you. So again, what are you looking at for Arizona's pass catchers, or is it more just like Conner plus Lockett for you?
Conner, Lockett game stacks, Conner DK game stacks, and then Lockett is like a standalone play. I think works out well too. That's kind of where I'm at. Like
so, no Kirk, no.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Same for you or no?
Yeah, I don't like this game that much. Like I think this is one of the games that will carry more popularity than I view it than I think it should have. So I'm cool. Yeah. And again, it doesn't matter how many lineups you play, you cannot play every game. That's just not a good like long-term strategy. So I got to cut off some games, and I think I'm much more willing to cut off this game than, of course, Dallas, Kansas City, Green Bay, Minnesota, and Cincinnati and Las Vegas.
So let's talk about that Cincy versus Vegas game. Move into our trends discussion because you are focusing on the Raiders offense here without Henry Ruggs. We've had a lot of weird situations here at the Raiders because John Gruden's gone, Henry Ruggs is gone. They've had a lot of most quote-unquote most relevant samples this year. You're going to look at them the past couple games. What are you seeing with this Raiders offense in that time?
Yeah, I mean, we could have looked at them, since John Gruden's departure, without Henry Ruggs, with Josh Jacobs, with Darren Waller, which kind of depends. So I did a little bit of a mix, but it's mostly The overall philosophy, I wanted to make a note. I mentioned this on Monday's recap podcast, but since changing head coaches from John Gruden to Rich Bisaccia, I think it's been a little bit relevant. The Raiders are playing up tempo. They've ranked top 4 in non-garbage time pace over their past 3 games. Under Gruden, they were 20th in pace, 5th in pass rate. Since then, under Bisaccia, 1st in pace, so up from 20th, 8th in pass rate, so still top 10. So they're throwing the ball, but they're playing faster. And my data actually has their offense ranked 6th in expected points per play since John Gruden resigned in disgrace. They were actually a league best in 2 post-bye games with Henry Ruggs, but in 2 games since their bye without Ruggs, they ranked 24th in expected points per play, according to my model. Now, according to Next Gen Stats, since 2020, without Ruggs on the field, Derek Carr's yards per attempt rate falls from 8.6 to 7.3. His EPA per dropback falls from 0.15 to 0.02, and his average depth of target falls from 8.9 to 7.4. The sample size with Deshaun Jackson could not be much smaller. He ran 4 routes, but we did see a 15-yard ADOT on those plays. So maybe you make your case where Jackson plays more and helps stretch the field a bit. He's not going to play as much as Henry Ruggs, but field stretchers help. And we've seen research, I believe from Kevin Cole,
on
very positive
back in the day.
Yeah, very positive on Deshaun Jackson's impact on a team's offense. Again, he's older now than literally ever because that's how it works for everybody. But we still saw a good ADOT on a small sample, so that at least gives me reason to believe that they'll try to stretch the field and get Deshaun out there. But the point being, his team has not been quite. They've been good without Gruden, but they haven't been good without Henry Ruggs. Like, that's the bigger issue. And this game for me, like I said, is really one of the most appealing. Total's 50 points, spread's just 1 point. The question is, like, can I get to the Raiders a lot? In 2 post-bye games without Ruggs, we've seen Zay Jones and Brian Edwards, who are 5,000 and 5,500 with their salaries respectively. They've run a route on 91% of the dropbacks, but have market shares of under 10% or lower. Love that. But more importantly, 23% target share for Darren Waller and for Hunter Renfrow. Renfrow's salary is 61, Waller's is 67. Josh Jacobs at 69 has a 53% snap rate, 57% red zone rushing share. So, like, I like this game. I like the Bengals. They're a lot easier to figure out who you want to play. So I wanted to dig into the Raiders and see if there was enough. I think there is for Waller. And this is not the type of play I usually would talk about, but I think Hunter Renfrow is a little bit more viable than I historically would have viewed him as. He's got a 3.8 yard ADOT, but I don't know. At least Waller, we can bring it back with. I feel like I think Waller's back on the menu.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll get the Jacobs, but I just wanted to see if I should be totally worried about the Raiders, and I think I'm worried, but not to the point where I'm going to think this game just completely busts. So, what are your thoughts on the Raiders here? And are you going to? What do you like the Bengals basically?
Yeah, so I think that worried is right. The way you phrase it is right. We're worried, but not worried enough to like bump out of the Bengals or like ignore Darren Waller, and that's kind of what you're looking for here. I think Waller works for sure. He has, like you said, 23% target share in that time. It also has 23% of the deep targets, 19% in the red zone. Renfrow actually has 31% in the red zone. So like the touchdown odds are there, but like he hasn't top 50 in either game. He did have some more yardage juice earlier on this year, but never got to 80, I don't think. So I'm going to ignore him. Waller, I think, works really well with Mixon and Chase lineups. And I've generally poo-pooed T. Higgins, but he's $6,500. If I look just and see he returned from injury, and I think that's the most relevant sample because like Jamar Chase blew up, and I think that they changed their prioritization. In that sample, since he returned, 24% target share for Higgins. What's 6?
I don't know. No, I did 24.
Oh,
because I knew the target share was coming.
Oh,
still 24%.
You've run the split. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. 24%, 30% deep, 19% in the red zone. That's good enough to use $6,500. So I would prioritize them Chase 1, Mixon 2, and then T. Higgins 3. But I think all 3 are in play. And I think that if I can game stack them with Waller, I'd like to do so. That's where I'm at with this game.
Yeah, I think like we're pretty limited, I'll say, with the Raiders, but I still like that. I still like being limited with Darren Waller. Again, I don't want to like skimp on tight end a ton. Like because we have Kittle who seems back, Kelsey who seems back-ish, if not back.
Yep.
Waller's back-ish at least. Like if those guys put up, 15 to 20 FanDuel points, someone down there in the value range is going to get to like 16 because he's going to score. But like that's not very predictable, and it's easy to cherry pick after the fact and be like, oh yeah, some of these guys match like the studs, but the predictability angle that is really scary. So I want to be in on Waller. I love T. Higgins enough at that salary. Love Jamar Chase. That's why I think I can't really get to like Justin Jefferson very much.
Yeah, correct.
And Joe Mixon, I think we've talked about a lot of running backs. I think Mixon might be one of the best plays of the slate, though.
Yeah, he's $7,600. Got a good role. Not the worst matchup. The Raiders are better against the rush than they are against the pass, if I recall correctly. Let me fact check that because we care about truth on this podcast. Las Vegas, 25th against the pass, 6th against the rush based on numberFire's metrics. So I don't think it matters too much, though. I think Mixon's fine. I'm okay being there. With him, prefer Chase, though, due to the path of lesser resistance and fewer options. I just like a lot of running backs, so that's why I'm there. Let's move now to the Bills versus the Colts. I'm talking here about the Bills defense when they face competent offenses, and that's a small sample because when you adjust for schedule, the Bills have the best defense in football. They are second against the pass, first against the rush. They're legitimately good. I want to know if they're good to the extent where we need to avoid Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman against them this week because I like both those guys' workloads. The Colts rank 11th in schedule adjusted offense based on numberFire's metrics. And that means this Sunday will be just the third time in 10 games the Bills have faced an offense in the top half of the league in that metric. 6 of their 9 games, have been against offenses in the bottom third of the league in total offense. So I want to know, did the decent offenses do anything against this defense? Those 2 games against good defense or good offenses were the Chiefs and the Titans. The Bills let up 20 points to the Chiefs, but 34 to the Titans. Patrick Mahomes really struggled. He was at negative 0.15 passing net expected points per dropback. Ryan Tannehill, though, was pretty good. He had 0.30 passing net expected points per dropback, the best mark of any high-volume quarterback against them this year. Plus, Derrick Henry went psycho, $143, 3 tutties in that game. He's the only guy to have more than 67 rushing yards against them. But it's at least very interesting that he did this. The Colts rank 4th in schedule-adjusted rushing efficiency. Jonathan Taylor on another level right now. I don't think he's out of play at $8,800, even in a super difficult matchup here. I'll have a tougher time with Pittman and the rest of the guys, though. A.J. Brown, 91 yards against the Bills. Corey Davis, 93, but that's the most they've led up to a pass catcher this year. Plus, like you mentioned on Monday in passing, T.Y. Hilton being back does have at least some negative impact on Pittman. So I am very interested in having shares with Jonathan Taylor in tournaments and pairing him with Stephon Diggs or Emmanuel Sanders. Are you comfortable enough with Taylor's role to use him in a really tough matchup this week?
Yes, but he's not going to be someone that I feel like I really prioritize over other backs unless I'm stacking this game, which is in the conversation. We saw Stephon Diggs he's been trending up slowly toward being treated as a wide receiver 1. Mm-hmm. We saw that last week. I know we saw the results, but we saw the role, and that's what I was more impressed with. So if I play Diggs with Taylor, I think that is a very sensible way to be a bit contrarian, which is like, hey, Diggs is coming off a huge game. Taylor's phenomenal right now. How's that contrarian? But like realistically, for what they can do, they're not going to be as popular as they deserve to be. Sounds like you're out on Pittman. Is that right?
We're not going to use him this week.
So I looked at his splits against tougher defenses because Carson Wentz, again, I looked pretty hard at a lot of quarterbacks, and I thought even Wentz below 7,000 could open up a lot. Wentz has been bad against good pass defenses, but Pittman Jr. Has 28% of the targets in those 3 games against top 12 adjusted pass defenses, 10.3 targets, 6.7 catches, 86 yards, and 1 touchdown per game. So I know that his role is going to downgrade a little bit with Hilton back, but Hilton should still help the overall offense be a little bit more efficient. So I'm not out on Pittman, but it's more the matter of I prefer some other guys. So I at least want to speak positively toward Michael Pittman Jr.
As a pivot, I'm looking at roster projections and like all three of Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, and Zeke Elliott are projected to be pretty low rostered. Preference for you in terms of a tournament pivot between those three?
It was
McCaffrey, Zeke, and Taylor.
I mean, I think that's got to be McCaffrey because he's going to be like it's hard to get to him and it's hard to justify the salary based on the matchup. But I do think that the role has been so good, even in like limited snaps, that there's enough. We've seen him perform on bad offenses in bad games. Like I don't want to get crazy here and not rank him last. So I would go McCaffrey. I'd try to find some salary to get up to McCaffrey because that is going to almost guarantee that you're more different at other positions by default.
Taylor or Zeke?
Taylor.
I think I agree. So let's move now to your second trend and talk about the 49ers offense with George Kittle being back. Needed him in a dynasty league, so I'm pretty happy about this to see him back and cooking once again. And he does change things for sure. They're facing the Jags, so we want to at least talk about the 49ers. What do you see with this offense now that George Kittle is back?
Yeah, so through the 2 trends and the 3 bookmakers the games that we've talked about, we've covered the 5 good games. The games that are left are bad. They're not good, and they're also pretty bad overall. I think this game might be the least bad of the bad games. It's a 6.5 point spread. That's not that big. I know the 49ers are on the road, so that helps narrow the spread. They're playing at 10 a.m. their time, which, anecdotally at least is not what you want, but that should in theory keep the game a bit closer. But I'm not really that concerned with this offense. I think this might be one of the sneakier plays for me, and they might not turn out to be sneaky, but I feel like they could be. This season, Jimmy Garoppolo ranks them on quarterbacks with at least 5 games in passing net expected points per dropback over expectation. That keeps the offense going. In weeks 3, 4, 9, and 10. So after Brandon Ayuk wasn't completely just on the sideline all the time, but with George Kittle playing, we see Deebo Samuel lead the team with 27% of the targets and George Kittle at 26% of the targets. Brandon Ayuk, just 6,000 this week on FanDuel. I think he's appealing. 16% target share, 1 downfield, 1 red zone, and 1 end zone target per game. That's really not bad for a receiver within an offense that we should be able to project as being efficient. But if you look at just the past 2 games, so with Kittle back, Brandon Ayuk even more involved in this offense. Kittle leads the team with 26% of targets, Samuel's at 24%, and Ayuk is at 21%. So it's a rare team where we see 20+% market shares for, capable players. No matter what you think of Brandon Ayuk, he's a capable NFL receiver for sure. I don't think that was really the concern. Is his talent level. It was the usage. Of course, Eli Mitchell's banged up, but has averaged 22.5 adjusted opportunities per game over the past 2. If he plays, I don't think there's enough because it doesn't feel like they'll have to throw him the ball or really run him into the ground at 7,000. I don't think I'm quite there, but again, I think there are some things you can say for certain right now. This team has 3 relevant pass catchers, and they should be able to throw the ball efficiently this week. So I think they're kind of interesting as a very easy way to go away from those top 5 games. Any thoughts on the 49ers here?
I think Kittle's probably the one guy I will use because Phil's tight end, really good upside. $6,800 is not bad for his workload. So Kittle I like. Ayuk at 6,000, I think it's a little too thin for me to get there. He has 8 and 4 targets in those 2 games, and it's a good target share, but they don't want to throw. I think they kind of hate Jimmy. He's played pretty well the past, but I don't think they trust him. Even despite the fact that he's played pretty well. Debo 76 is oversalaried. I think Ayuk's oversalaried at Ayuk versus Manny at 58. I want Manny by a pretty significant margin, honestly. So Emmanuel Sanders. I would say to me, it's mostly just Kittle. So maybe I'm a bit lower on them than you might be, just because their hatred of Garoppolo and hatred of throwing the football scares me away from guys who I think might be a bit oversalaried for their roles.
I think it comes down to the fact, I think this game has the potential to be more competitive than some of the other games down in the garbage range. So outside the top 5, 6.5 points is not enough for me to auto assume, especially on the road with the time change, that the 49ers just floor the Jaguars, who have been pretty scrappy. So it was more a matter of I don't want to write off George Kittle because they're just going to run the ball. They're going to play from ahead too much. I think the passing efficiency is pretty much a lock. So I'm kind of setting myself up for a soundbite of Jimmy Garoppolo being terrible, but Kittle is very much in play. I think Ayuk is in play because receiver, we have Michael Gallup, but I don't really feel good about anybody else in the 5,000 range, to the point where I would say, yeah, I'm cool playing them in a single lineup. So I want to get back up to the 6,000 range. I think Brandon Ayuk is not significantly worse than some other options there. So, and he would typically be someone I would overlook until I look closer at this team.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I don't think I'm there with Debo, which I know is kind of a running joke at this point, but I prefer other games, of course, and Amari Cooper to Debo Samuel, but
right.
I think he's
part of the reason why I fought you on Debo is because he's getting a 30% target share. He's not getting that anymore, so I don't mind not fighting you on that one.
Yeah,
he's getting all the running back carries now, though.
So I think we both like Kittle. Sounds like we're both pretty cool with Waller to some degree.
Yeah,
I'd have Kittle over Waller, but I think the real change is I think Ayuk is enough. I just wish there was somebody on the Jaguars I could bring it back with.
Yeah, I don't think there is either. James Robinson's banged up again. Everything else sucks. So I agree. I think it would be Kittle as a one-off, basically. Do you prefer Ayuk or Emmanuel Sanders?
I think I prefer Brandon Ayuk.
Do you want to do a bet head-to-head?
No.
Why? Aw. Thought we could have got one.
Can I do a bet on Dearness Johnson versus? Nah, never mind.
No, I'll do a bet. If Nick Chubb sits, I'll take a bet. Which one? What do you want?
No, I was going to make a joke because you basically made him sound like the lock of the week.
If Nick Chubb can't go, he's pretty close. Sorry. I value productive players, and Dearness Johnson happens to be one. Speaking of productive players, let's talk about Tua Tagovailoa. The Dolphins are playing this week in a plus matchup, and the Jets defense is getting shredded recently. They're now dead last by numberFire's schedule-adjusted defensive metrics, and that led to the Dolphins' salaries getting jacked way up. Jalen Waddle, $6,700. Mike Gesicki is $63,000. Those are not value salaries. So we have to decide if there is enough juice to justify those very high salaries. This is the third time Tua Tagovailoa has played in a game against, actually it's his fourth. The fourth time he has played in a game against a softer defense. 3 of his 6 starts this year were against top 6 pass defenses by numberFire's metrics. The other 3 were against teams outside the top 20. That does include Baltimore. So he didn't start that game, but he played in it. So I'll factor that in. Look at those 3 games against teams outside the top 20. Tua is at 0.24 passing net expected points per dropback. That is despite playing with a broken finger for one of them. And it's also a key split because Devontae Parker did not play in any of those games, and they still managed to be pretty efficient in those. So that's a plus. The problem is that neither Waddle nor Gesicki has gotten a lot of high leverage looks in those games. They're both at 1.3 deep targets per game. Gesicki has 18% of the red zone targets. Waddle is at 9%. Gesicki did have 100 yards in one of the games. He had 85 in another. He had 115 and 85, so an average of 100 in those 2 games. Waddle had at least 60 in all 3 of them. But they do seem to have somewhat muted ceilings because they're not getting a lot of downfield work. I think I'm here with Gesicki at 63. I think Waddle's oversalaried, despite the good matchup. I'm having a hard time with him. But I wanted to ask you at least, do you worry about upside with Waddle and Gesicki, or is the matchup plus the overall usage good enough to overcome that for you?
I think that they're just better situations for me to want to go to. I think Gesicki's salary is a bit too much for me. I want to find a way to get back up to the Kittle range, to the Waller range. We haven't even talked about Mark Andrews. I've kind of pretended like he's not on the slate. It's just because of that game I don't like so much. But Gesicki, like, find me 400 to get to Darren Waller, I think, is where I am with Gesicki. And as much as I like Tua and want to root for him, I don't really perceive this being like the best offense for the week or really like a top 5 offense. So I don't see a whole lot of interest in Jalen Waddle. And it's kind of weird because like over the years when we've done the show, the like upper 6 range is like where we really dig into receivers. And like this guy's like his role is too good for the salary. We're kind of playing that like bounce back regression game, that kind of stuff. But I don't really see the case to get to Jalen Waddle in this particular matchup. So I'm probably not going to have any Dolphins this week. I wanted to ask you about Myles Gaskin, who I already know what you're going to say, but probably going to rate out well enough in the optimizers again.
Should he?
I'm just saying he's probably going to.
In 4 games with no Malcolm Brown, he is at 58.5 yards from scrimmage per game. What is that? Like, you're probably right, but ew. It's so gross.
I mean, I'm with you. I'm at like, I want to.
No. I want yards. I want touchdowns.
Yeah, he's like a top 6 value everywhere.
Should he be? Should he be?
It's like you're mad at me now.
Well,
well, you're always mad at me, it feels like.
I'm always angry. I think I'm higher on Gesicki than you are. I think the takeaway that I've had from our discussion is that I need to, like, I was looking into some lower salary tight ends. Like, you mentioned Ertz. I think he's interesting at least. Adam Troutman's 48, and I think Troutman's role is good enough to be like a consideration for DFS. But when I can instead, I mean, Dan Arnold too at 54 is whatever. But I think I do need to make sure I'm getting to Kelsey, Kittle, Waller, Gesicki more than I thought I did initially. I think I need to be higher than I was. That's my takeaway.
Welcome to the club.
Indeed. Joining you there. Weather for this week, nothing too concerning. Potential rain for the Browns-Lions game. Potential rain for the Bears-Ravens game. Wind for Browns-Lions at 12 miles per hour. That's fine. It's whatever. Bills-Colts is 11 miles per hour. Titans-Texans is 11. And Cowboys-Chiefs is 12. Nothing of concern right now. I would just check back on Sunday to make sure nothing has changed with those games. Let's move now to our position-by-position breakdown based on the salaries over at FanDuel.com. Brandon, who you got at quarterback for week number 11?
I'm going to go with Dak Prescott. 8,400 is the salary. Kansas City's 24th against the pass, according to numberFire's adjusted metrics. Dak has played 1 pass defense outside the top 20. He had 296 yards and 2 touchdowns for 0.79 passing net expected points per dropback against that team. That's about 7 times the NFL average, which is 0.11. Versus the other bottom half defense, which was 19th, 238 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0.47 passing net expected points per dropback. So about 4 times as efficient. I think he's the only quarterback I really cannot overthink. I think I have him just a tinge above Patrick Mahomes, who is my second love, which again, I know these aren't like the craziest quarterback loves, but it's still a good quarterback week. We have guys who can get to 30, and I don't think they're going to come from like below the 75 and below range, just based on what we're looking at down there, unless Russ like comes back to life. Maybe he needs some more nano bubbles, but
Burrow.
I was going to say Burrow is the exception. I think he's the one guy I will get to. I mentioned him for an upcoming segment for the FanDuel Hurry Up with T. Higgins is like kind of a value stack. I like that this week. But Mahomes, I mean, look, like the other quarterbacks have flaws. For Aaron Rodgers, I think the game has paths to being underwhelming. For Kyler and Russ, it's health and the game being underwhelming. I think it's these two. Dallas is 13th in passing ADOT faced, but 27th in yards per target allowed on actual downfield passes. So They might try to stifle the downfield pass, but not be that successful at it. But I think Dak, again, is my number one.
Yeah, I think I have Mahomes by a hair over Dak because he's at home, whereas Prescott is outside, which is not typically the case. That's the only thing I have against Dak, though. Literally the only thing. Like I tried to nitpick, but I looked at like they've historically had some funky home road splits, but like this year, Dak on the road is at 0.28 passing net expected points per dropback. That's still elite. Like that's one of the best marks in football. He's stupid good. So I try to nitpick. The Chiefs defense has gotten better, but they've done that against Taylor Heineke, Daniel Jones, Jordan Love, Derek Carr. Dak is a different beast. So I have the same loves as you. Dak Prescott, Patrick Mahomes. I have Mahomes the slightest bit above. So like for our head-to-head, I'm going Mahomes. For tournaments, this might be one of the few times where I actually do let roster rate dictate where I go at quarterback because I was checking out some early stuff and Dak wasn't too high. And if that continues to be the case, I will pivot and go Dak over Mahomes for like a single entry type tournament. But I think they're the top two guys this week. I am steadily increasing my inclination towards Joe Burrow. Might get there. He might be 3. I think probably go Josh Allen, but like I don't know.
Yeah, it's Burrow and Allen is the only other quarterbacks I think I would even roster.
Yeah,
and Burrow or Allen, I think might only be someone I get to if it's like, hey, I have some extra salary and I've only played Mahomes and Dak, and like just give me the ability to get up. But
sure,
I don't think I'm going to prioritize that.
Okay, so let's move now to running back. What you got there?
I'm actually going to start with Joe Mixon at 76. I think running back is really good at the top, but also in the mid-range, and I don't want to overlook that. With a lack of value at receiver and not so much a lack of value at tight end, but the need for me to want to pay up, I'm going to keep all that in mind and not recommend Christian McCaffrey, and I'll instead start with Joe Mixon at 76. I think Mixon's in a really good spot. And in games where he's played at least half the snaps, he's averaged 23.8 adjusted opportunities per game, which is pretty good. It feels like it's McCaffrey and like Derrick Henry and then everyone else anyway in that category. I'm sure Jim could tell me very specifically where that stacks up, but he is asking.
Do you want it?
Sure, go ahead.
So for relevant backs on the main slate this week, Mixon ranks 11th in that department.
What's your relevant sample for him? Same.
Well, 8 full games. What do you have?
I just have in games with half.
Snaps. We lopped off the same game then. But that does include like small sample James Conner. That does include small sample Dearness Johnson.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it does.
So like, I would rank him higher than that. I think he's in play this week too.
Yeah, 60% of the team's red zone carries, 26% of their overall opportunities in those games. Vegas is below average in key rushing metrics against running backs. I know you pointed out that they're pretty good in schedule adjusted numbers overall, but I think in just the running back stuff, they're not that worrisome. And again, it gives me balance with some upside for Mixon. And then again, I want to allocate salary to receiver and tight end. So I wanted to be fair and not go overboard with my first love at running back. My second love at running back is going to be A.J. Dillon. I think it's just too easy. 51% snap rate last week, even with Aaron Jones playing. They've been using him all season. We don't really have to assume, we don't have to guess at what the role is going to be. Minnesota is 30th in rushing net expected points per carry allowed to running backs, 29th in rushing success rate allowed to backs. And he's actually been a more efficient rusher than Aaron Jones, so you got to like that. My third love, I'm going to stick with David Montgomery. I don't want to talk myself out of an 85% snap rate for a back who was in his first game, returning in his first game with a viable, I would say we could consider Khalil Herbert like a viable rusher before then. He got just sent to the ether. They gave David Montgomery an elite snap rate. Then he's got the bye. There's no real reason to think that he won't play 80% of the snaps again this week. Ran 19 routes, had 2 targets in that game. I know the passing volume and passing efficiency might not be great, but you're pretty much guaranteed a fantastic workload.
Yeah, that's why I have Montgomery in my list still too. Despite we ranked him.
I thought you might have taken him out.
No, I ranked him below a lot of guys, but that's based on contingencies of if Nick Chubb doesn't play, which I think he will, of if Clyde Edwards-Helaire is inactive, which I think he will be. like most likely scenario is that CEH and Chubb both play. And if that's true, then David Montgomery is going to be my favorite guy down here. So same reasonings for you, just stupid red zone work. And Baltimore can stop the rush, but like this snap rate at $6,800 is hard to ignore. AJ Dillon, also one of my loves, overlapping with you there. Vikings 29th against the rush. Dillon, 128 yards last week, 56% red zone share. Like, his salary for his workload should be 8 to 85, somewhere in there, and he's 7,000. So just, he's pretty close to lock button for me. Dalvin is my top love for this week. Green Bay is uninterested, I would say, in stopping the rush. They rank 27th there. Dalvin is at 29 adjusted opportunities per game in his full games with 119 yards per game, 45% red zone share. I think you just stack up those two running backs in that one game, get a game stack there, ignore potential passing efficiency, weird stuff for a divisional game, and just ride elsewhere for your pass catchers. So let's move now to wide receiver. Brandon, what do you have there?
Well, because I'm okay saving some salary at running back and building around those guys who I think are all under salary to some degree, I allowed myself to recommend Tyreek Hill at 85. He has the top 90th percentile value in my model. So accounting for salary is still the best play from a ceiling standpoint, which is not surprising. High ADOT receiver at home in a game with a high total, tight spread. That's probably Jim's checklist, although I feel like maybe I don't know what Jim's checklists are anymore. Dallas doesn't really limit the downfield passes as much as they might try to. And again, I want to prioritize him with the mid-level value at running back. My second love, though, lots of names in the 7,000 range to like, but I want to be fair and be realistic here, especially if I'm playing Dak and Mahomes as my primary quarterbacks. So I'll go with T. Higgins at 65 from week 5 on with Higgins back. But, fully accounting for Jamar Chase being their number one. Higgins still has a 24% target share, while Chase is at 27%. I don't actually know if that's the right orientation, but Higgins.
It looks right, I think. You
did
24, and I think the 2 and the 4 were in the right order. So
I'm flipped around on like the camera orientation. So I'm a podcaster, not really a video person.
Video boy.
Yeah, I'm not a video boy. Higgins is averaging 2.2 downfield targets, so passes traveling at least 16 yards from the line of scrimmage. One red zone target per game in that 5-game sample. There's a floor and ceiling for Higgins at a reasonable salary in a game that I like. And my third love, while yes, I'm going to say I want tight ends and receivers at the high end, I think there's one good play in the value range at receiver, and I'm going to let you have him. So I'm going to say Brandon Ayuk. I think that Ayuk's role still good for the salary within a game where his team should be efficient throwing the ball, and he's got a good red zone role. 21% target share the past 2 games with Kittle back. That might be 6 targets. I still think that's enough at 6,000 just because of what is below him. I don't there's nothing that really appeals to me, and that's been the case for weeks now. So I think that passing efficiency should just be kind of locked in against the team that's 27th against the pass. I don't want to write off the 49ers entirely.
Sure. With Higgins, I thought about him too. I know I've been more lukewarm on him. I am higher on him now than I've been, I think, the entire year. So I will use him at 65. My concern previously is that he was not getting deep targets, but now he is. So I would use Higgins as well. My first love is overlapping with yours and Tyreek Hill. He's similar to Mahomes, where the Cowboys are an aggressive defense, which is good for wide receivers because we've seen Kadarius Toney, Antonio Brown, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Chris Godwin all go for 100+ yards against this defense. And Toney has some overlap with Tyreek Hill. So I think that's kind of a nice thing to see Toney going off there. Hill's target share is at 27%. I think he's amazing at 85. Don't want to overthink it. We'll go Tyreek Hill. My second love bumping down is Emmanuel Sanders at $5,800. The role for him may have been overstated before, but he's $5,800 in a potentially competitive game. In games with Dawson Knox playing, Manny's target share does go down to 17%, but he still has a 30% deep target share in those games. The Colts are a team that's beatable through the air. They're pretty good against the rush, which just plays into Buffalo's hands, where they're probably going to throw this ball 50 times. It's not a projection, but 50 is very realistic for this team in this game. So I think that I want to get to Emmanuel Sanders at 58. The guy you alluded to, I think, was Michael Gallup, right?
Yep.
Okay. Michael Gallup, $5,400. In the 2 games he has played, 7 and 5 targets. Didn't play the full game in the first game there, did play pretty late last week. I think they were trying to work him up. Despite the blowout, they let him run a lot of routes.
They wanted him to get worked up.
Yeah,
throw some things at him, make him worry a bit.
Just get him peed off. I don't know if I can say the other words, so I'll say peed. I think that he's low salaried access to a good game, and I want to do that when I can. And Gallup gets me that. Realistically, could do very well. It's not a great floor, but like if we're talking Michael Gallup versus like Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Gallup has the better role, and I would say that pretty definitively. So to me, Gallup the best lower salary guy, but I do like Manny as well. Let's move to tight end. What you going with there?
I'll go with George Kittle. I know I've said it 1,000 times, but I'm going to build around the better tight ends this week with Kelsey, Kittle, and Waller. Not really going to play Mark Andrews, which could burn me, but I can't play them all. I think Kittle's back to sort of the Kittle of old. He's tied with Dallas Goedert for the league lead in yards per route run among tight ends. Again, I expect this team to be efficient. So, and really the salary is a bit too low, especially when I view him close to like Mike Gesicki. I think that is enough to make me feel like the salary is a bit too low. But if I really have to go down the salary range at tight end, I think it's just going to be Zach Ertz, regardless of who the quarterback is. But in 2 games with Kyler Murray, including a game where Ertz played just 49% of the snaps, he has a 15% target share and a 40% red zone target share. He's got 20% of the targets in 2 games without DeAndre Hopkins. I don't like this game overall, but I understand how it could be good. The total's high. Obviously, that means something. So for 5,000, that's appealing.
Yeah, I had Adam Troutman as one of my loves. I do still think that he's my favorite of the lower salary guys, given that he has 17% target share in 2 games with touchdown Trevor. But I'm going to go with George Kittle and Mike Gesicki. Going to change some gears here. Kittle, the same reasons you mentioned. Like the yardage upside is very good. The quality play is very good. I like the matchup for him. I think the script is totally fine. So I think that Kittle would be my one. With Gesicki being 2, I think I'm higher on Gesicki than you are. He's $6,300, but like $115 in one game with Tua, no Devontae Parker, 85 in another. 7 targets last week. We'll ignore what happened on those 7 targets. Didn't happen. I think Tua should be efficient in this game. Matchup is terrible. The Jets are hideous, so I'll go Gesicki. And if you need to say salary, Troutman, but like I'd like to get into the Gesicki plus range personally.
Do you have Troutman over Ertz?
Good question. I'm not sure.
Okay, I was just curious.
I think they're very similar. Like both guys could get you 15, which is kind of what you need for this bargain salary, and just at tight end in general. So either's fine. No objection to Ertz if that's what you're asking. Defense. What are you going with there?
I was trying to go away from the team you have, but I don't know if I can. I think it's just the best defensive play of the week, and that's Washington at 3,500. They're the best value in my numbers, and according to Pro Football Focus, they have the 3rd best defensive line matchup among the main slate teams. Like, yeah, I know that Cam Newton's going to be an upgrade, but I don't think it's enough to go away from a team that is capable. I mean, I know their defense has been not great, but yeah. I think that unless you're really willing to maybe play like Houston against the Titans or something, I think that this is easily the standout team below 4,000.
I think it's worth noting that the PFF thing you mentioned adjusts for the fact that Chase Young will not play. Like that accounts for that, the metric that you're citing. Yeah. So that's even with Chase Young being taken out, it's still a plus advantage. It's because Carolina's offensive line is so bad. Like I talked about, that's why I was on the Cardinals last week, was because they lost Irving, they lost Paradis, like they lost a lot of dudes. And so I didn't see a situation in which they played well. They did, to their credit, but like that's might not be sustainable. So I agree. Cam does elevate the Panthers, but $3,500, I'm going to take that for sure. Other defenses I would at least like toss out there. I will have a non-zero number of Kansas City lineups in ones where I don't use the Cowboys. I think the Cowboys win this game potentially, but like, just, $3,300 playing better, weird stuff happens, whatever.
Yeah. And you also, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I say this stat all the time, but 60% of FanDuel points for defenses come from sacks and turnovers, not points allowed. Like that's not really how it works. And if you have a lot of passing volume, a lot of plays, that just leads to more chances for sacks, turnovers, pick sixes, fumble sixes, things like that.
Bengals defense, I'm okay with.
Yeah.
$3,600 facing the Raiders. If I want to fully embrace the thought process that maybe the Raiders get downgraded with no Henry Ruggs and they're kind of struggling right now, I think the under on the Vegas team total might also be in play. So Bengals defense at $3,600. I am okay with that. Panthers defense in that Washington game, $4,100. Really talented defense. Heineke's kind of a D-gaffer. That's a good thing. So I think that's what I'd be looking at there is Panthers, Bengals, Washington, sprinkles of Kansas City, but trying to avoid it if I can.
Can you play any Texans at 3,000?
Absolutely not.
Okay, yeah, me neither.
That is all that we have here for today. Brandon, any final thoughts for you before we send off the good people to assemble their beautiful, beautiful lineups?
Well, if it's anything like recent weeks, we're going to find a lot of information by tomorrow that changes everything we talked about. But I do think we covered things as is right now. And
yeah,
it's very evident there's one game to stack. And even that game has some paths to failure. But, really, I would say rank the games. And that way you're not just kind of playing what the optimizers say. Sit back, look into these, even because it's just the top 5 games if you want to look in those games and say, which of these games is too popular or not popular enough, because some of them are going to be one of each.
So rank the games, but also rank out the running backs. I think that's the other thing for this week. Rank out them, decide how you want to prioritize them, because there are a lot of good ones for this week, and keep that in mind. That is all that we have here for today on the Heat Check, but as always, a lot of good stuff coming your way for the rest of this week. Tom Vecchio has you covered at NBA and NHL DFS with the Daily ISO and the Daily Deke. Austin Swain got you covered for UFC for this week, coming up on Friday. No PGA next week. That'll be back after the new year, but still plenty of good stuff here. We also have a recap podcast every Monday to wrap things up. Get that by subscribing to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcast. Don't forget the Listener League, FanDuel.com/league/Listener League, $5 entry, 3 entries max. There is no rake. FanDuel.com/league/Listener League. Brandon, if people have questions for you on Twitter, where can they find you there?
I'm at Gadula13, GDULA13.
And I'm at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to everyone for tuning in for today. Good luck to you with your lineups. We'll talk to you once again on Monday to wrap it all up. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire.